into what he called a bedeviled box with a fussy lid, American architect Frank Lloyd Wright sought to design homes that were beautiful, in harmony with nature, and that reflected the American ideals of freedom and democracy. His revolutionary architecture led to innovative reforms in designs and techniques, some of which are still in use today. After attending only 2 semesters of college, Frank Lloyd Wright dropped out and headed to Chicago, where he was eventually hired by the prominent architect Louis Sullivan. He remained with Sullivan for 6 years before establishing his own architectural practice in 1893 at the age of 26. According to noted Wright scholar Donald Hoffman, Wright gained 3 things from Sullivan that would guide his long and prolific career as an architect. Hoffman lists them as an undiluted concept of the architect as an artist, a high intellectual regard for nature, and a fervent desire to create for America an architecture of its own. When Wright began his private practice, he longed to build a sensible house. In his book, The Natural House, Wright states that the typical American house lied about everything. It had no sense of unity at all, nor any such sense of space as should belong to a free people. To take away any one of these so-called homes would have improved the landscape and cleared the atmosphere. He believed the only way to simplify the awful building in vogue at the time was to create a better building. In an 1894 essay, Wright presented a set of golden rules for house building. In referring to the house, he said, "It should appear to be a part of the site, and not a foreign element set up boxwise on edge, to the utter humiliation of every natural thing in sight." According to Wright, home building is the most important of the arts and the least understood. 2 years later, Wright said, "I have to believe that the time is not so very far distant when the American home will be a great work of art, respected the world over because of its integrity, its real worth." Designing a home that was in harmony with nature was an important goal for Wright. Wright was introduced to the beauty of nature during his childhood summers spent on the family farm in Wisconsin, and through his reading of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. Nature provided Wright with examples of form and structure that he used in his architectural designs. For example, Wright saw the broad horizon of the prairie as expressing the American ideal of freedom. Using long horizontal lines, Wright began to express that freedom in his home designs. The horizontal also helped to achieve his goal of connecting the house with the land. Wright showed the horizontal through several methods. He reduced the pitch of the roof, lengthened it, and brought it closer to the ground. He extended sections of the building beyond the base of direct support. These extensions of the roof and building are called cantilever. It was a new method never before used in America. A familiar example of this is falling water in Pennsylvania. European architect Walter C. Behrend identified parallels between Wright's cantilevers and nature when he said, "In these widely overhanging eaves, spreading themselves canopy-like over terraces and balconies, there seems to be a plant-like existence translated into architectural form." The horizontal was also shown through long bands of casement windows. When opened, these casement windows became small cantilevers. In his book, The Natural House, Wright said, "The casement window associated house with the out-of-doors, gave free openings outward. If it had not existed, I should have invented it. But it was not used at that time in the United States, so I lost many clients because I insisted upon it." Another way that Wright expressed the horizontal was in his use of mortar in brick and stone walls. The horizontal mortar was raked, while the vertical mortar was made flush with the bricks. This rendered the vertical lines less noticeable than the horizontal lines. Wright believed that American architecture should reflect the values and ideas of a democratic society. As a young architect, Wright felt that the traditional boxes within a box form of architecture was too confining and restrictive. He said, "I was a free son of a free people, and I wanted to be free." With the introduction of the open floor plan, Wright destroyed the box and freed the interior space. According to Catherine Smith, a former professor of architectural history, Wright's use of the open floor plan was the first revolutionary change in architectural space since the Renaissance. With the publication of Wright's work in Germany in 1910, several European architects and designers began to imitate the open floor plan. Frank Lloyd Wright had used the term prairie house to describe his early home designs. During the 1930s, Wright began designing what he called Usonian houses. The term Usonia referred to the United States of America. The Usonian houses were a smaller, more affordable version of the prairie house, specifically designed for the American middle-class family. Usonian houses were characterized by carports, in-floor heating, slab-on-grade, and floor-to-ceiling glass windows and doors. They were also characterized by the lack of basements, attics, and leaded art glass. Examples of Usonian houses can be found in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. The Willey House was built in Minneapolis in 1934. According to the 1969 July-August edition of Northwest Architect magazine, it was considered historically significant because it constituted a bridge between his prairie houses, built before World War I, and the Usonian houses, most of which were built during the 1940s. In the same edition of Northwest Architect, Dr. Paul Ohlfeldt of St. Louis Park explained that he and his wife were looking for a home that would satisfy their family needs in addition to being a place of beauty. In 1958, Wright agreed to draw some designs for them. The Ohlfeldts were thrilled with the beauty of the house and the intimate relation of the house with the local terrain. Over 50 years later, the Ohlfeldts are still happily living in their Wright-designed home. Mr. Henry Niels, whose Minneapolis home was completed in 1951, wrote in Northwest Architect, "When we met Mr. Wright, we knew we were in the presence of a genius. The house was designed to blend into the elevation of the site from east to west, with one end of the roof nearly touching the ground, and the other 15 feet above. We were thrilled with its design. Full-length glass windows form the northwest exposure, with 3 glass doors leading to the terrace, which gives an excellent view of the setting sun from March to September." Margot Stipe of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation said, "In creating what he called an architecture for democracy, Wright redefined our concept of space by offering everyone the opportunity to live and grow in nourishing environments, connected physically and spiritually to the natural world. But his genius was not confined to America. Major exhibitions have been mounted not only here in the United States, but also in Europe and Japan. Significant progress has been made by both the public and private sectors in saving Wright buildings from destruction. According to Ms. Stipe, Frank Lloyd Wright was the greatest of the architectural pioneers of the 20th century, blazing trails and challenging men and technology to ever higher achievement."